Okay, ladies and gentlemen, pleasure to be here again. This is going to be a deeper dive into the video I put out about a week ago, I think now, about XR, and there was a lot of data kind of juxtaposed against the visuals, and I wanted to kind of draw out some more information about what you would have seen there. It wasn't so easy to see at times, and there was a lot of obviously a short amount of time, so that basically this is going to be done in one take, by the way, so just bear with me. I'm going to try and get through this reasonably quickly. I don't want this to be a long video, but yeah, we're going to do a bit of a data dive, and I want to show you a few things that I think might be interesting. So we have up here the relative amount of gases and oxygen, obviously nitrogen, in the environment, and you're going to see that the gases and other elements within the environment are actually quite small. We have 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen in our environment, and a very, very small 0.037 percentage here of CO2. And in this piece here, data here, we got again the atmosphere, oxygen and so on in the green, and these trace gases, again very small amounts. These trace gases, of course, if you consider argon as well, are going to give you again 0.04 percentage of CO2. So just to give you a basic idea of what we're talking about. Now, if you include water vapor, which is 90% of these, these smaller gases that are not nitrogen and oxygen, you'll see again that it's water vapor is the largest by a very long stretch of these gases that traps heat. So we have carbon dioxide on the left here, represents 63%, methane and other gases as well. So certain aerosols are going to be 18% of even that. All of this comes to us courtesy of the data set that I pulled out of Inconvenient Facts, which is a book. It's very interesting, and I love the fact that you've got the sources down at the bottom as well, so you can go and check this out. This is all either raw data or collections of data from very mainstream data gatherers and scientific organizations and bodies across the world. So this is important. Here we have the amount of sources of atmospheric carbon dioxide. So we get a lot of carbon dioxide stored in oceans. It gets sucked up by oceans, and then as the climate rises again, as weather gets hotter, the oceans put out again the CO2. It's like if you crack a can open, you'll get that effect. This is what that is. The biosphere, obviously, cows farting and so on, and all manner of natural processes that release carbon dioxide as well. And here you're going to find at the bottom the burning of fossil fuels, 3.27%, is actually due to us. And again, just to put some perspective on this, again, you'll see here carbon dioxide, a man-made, is 3.225% in this graph. Natural, 96.7%, and these are the increments here of coal, natural gases, oils, and so on. And this is an interesting little thing. It just tells you more or less what happens with the sun. Obviously, cloud cover, ice cover reflects a lot of that radiation back into space. Essentially, some of it gets caught. CO2 will capture some of this heat. It's very important. It gives us heat. There are times in the past, a very, very long time ago, that this did not happen, and the Earth was either extremely hot or extraordinarily cold, and nothing really thrived before the Cambrian explosion. So CO2, apart from being the life source for all vegetation on the planet, it captures this air, and it's given us this Goldilocks effect that's so important to life in our solar system, and indeed in the rest of the galaxy and the universe. I'm sure there are pleasant little aliens running around out there having fun, doing pretty much exactly what we're doing. Yeah, they probably need some CO2 as well. Here's the positive and negative feedback mechanisms. Again, important. The carbon flux basically helps to regulate various amounts of CO2 in the atmosphere. You'll see here cooling and warming effects, and this cycle that pervades our planet, and you can have a little read of that in your own time. I won't go through it just now, but you'll see how the expanding and contracting Antarctic and Arctic and deserts and so on, and cloud cover all feed into this mechanism, which goes back and forth. There are positive and negative feedbacks. We like the positive feedbacks because they regulate much more our climate, and of course help to, as we churn out more CO2, they're going to capture more of this CO2, forests and so on, hedgerows and stuff like this by motorways. Obviously very good way of sucking some of that CO2 into plant material. I'm just going to go through this again. You see fossil fuels, land usage, agriculture waste. This gets taken into land, and forests, trees, plants, whatever else, help to feed the insects. Oceans, a certain amount goes into the oceans, and of course some stays in the atmosphere. Coming on to some of the data that I put in the other video, you'll see here the Cambrian explosion, masses of CO2 in the atmosphere, and of course a huge number of massive flowers, plants, trees. Some of the flowers going back, you couldn't really call them flowers, they were the size of trees, but they liked CO2. This is 8,000 parts per million CO2, and of course lots of dinosaurs living at the time. So yes, and now it goes, you'll see CO2 levels really dipping towards the end of this into the Trienary and Quaternary period, which we're in now. Another little data set. We'll see it's the cyclical nature of our planet, and of course this big pushing up, and you'll see down the bottom there, the red line. This is the death zone. We're quite close to this. We were quite close to this death zone, and it's still, this is a very small piece of data in relation to the one just before this. But you'll see obviously the relative CO2 which has been pushed up by the Industrial Revolution and the post-industrial revolution. And again, these ice ages, and you'll notice that there are warm periods, 4 of them you can count, which are basically higher than our own at the moment. This is over 800,000 years. So again, just trying to draw, set the table here for what's to come a little later. 80,000 year period, the current interglacial period, and CO2 essentially rising, not by that much, but it's going up, and we can see today CO2 level it's about 410 parts per million at the moment, up about 150 pre-industrial age. This is quite important. This is the painting the wall red scenario. So every 50 parts per million more CO2 you put in the atmosphere, actually the more the climate stabilizes, the more the heat just begins to stabilize, and it goes down and down basically. So you can have, as we've seen, 5,000 parts per million, 6,000 parts per million. Heat doesn't necessarily, it certainly doesn't track that, and will lower and kind of level out. And of course we're now at 410 parts per million. Of course it's due to rise somewhat But yeah, not by a massive amount. Again, you can see here the survival threshold for vegetation. We were almost hitting that not too long ago. Yeah, you'll see it. It's just all there now. Recently, we've got a piece of data here from about 1960. We've seen this rise, and it's certainly to do with putting more CO2 in the atmosphere. It is not a significant temperature climb, though. We're going to see this. So thermometer data shows a temperature increase of 0.85 C and 1.5 Fahrenheit since 1850. This is when the Industrial Revolution was kicking off, and you're going to see this, obviously, this temperature, thermometer gauge here. There are periods where things level out and then of course get hotter. This is the red is the temperature anomaly, which measures the difference or the margin between where things should be in terms of probability and where things of course went. This is up until 2010, I believe. Here is one of those trends that stabilizes, of course, CO2 going upwards and a stabilizing trend. We're going to see this again later, it's interesting what happens later. And again, CO2, so obviously this is important. We do all see a temperature rise. It is not that significant. You'll see the 0.8 there up to the, minus 0.8 up until about the 8. So 1 degree, basically a 1 degree rise, something around there. This was one of the things that we saw a lot in the media. This is cherry picked. We're just going to move on to cherry picked hurricane power data here. You'll see an upward trend, but here was the upward trend when you actually look at and you pull out, get a bit macro, and you'll see that things were actually trending slightly downwards, or there was a very regular, straightforward trend here. And again, this is I can't stress this enough. There have been Minoan warm periods, Roman warm periods, the medieval warm period. People were saying back then that grapes were growing in Scotland, which, if you know anything about England and its the UK and its temperatures, that's a pretty crazy thing to be seeing, because Scotland is cold and it rains all the time now. Quite an amazing thing to see, grapes growing up there in Scotland. Predictions, a lot of predictions made over the last few decades. The actual heat, the variations, of course, and the actual temperature, always under tracking what the predictions have been, and there are some ridiculous predictions made through the decades. People like Paul Ehrlich, Maurice Strong, obviously Al Gore, making wild predictions. Al Gore had said that back in the 90s that there'd be no. He was saying that there might not be any snow on the ice caps within 5 years or within 6 years, and that was just nonsense, completely untrue. We're going to go into some more data with that. Trends. This is United States. Where the United States is an interesting data set to pull from, because obviously we have tons more measuring capabilities in the States. People have been measuring the weather there for quite a substantial period of time, hundreds of years, and very well as well. Certainly through the 20th century, we have tons of measuring facilities and climate centers and so on, very scientifically and rigorously taking data, and also significantly, it's been one of the biggest offenders in CO2 output for a very long time. Not quite as long as the UK, but they chuck out all manner of shite into the atmosphere. So you would expect the area around the United States to be warming. And it's not necessarily what we're seeing. Of course, there has been a small degree of warming. It's essentially amounts to, or it might well amount to, just statistical noise. within our climate system. But you'll see here very wet weather, very dry weather. Again, tracking, nothing too much to report. A percentage of percentage of the globe in drought, tracking downwards. Interesting. And here as well, I just came across this the other day. Number of typhoons in Japan, formed in Japan over time. You're going to see, what was it, the numbers there down the bottom tells you what the range has been. Again, tracking downwards. Deaths, of course, fewer deaths from warmer weather in the US. And here's the rub. Cold weather is, of course, killing a lot more people than hot weather, and it's the moderately cool weather as well that kills. It's not necessarily the extremes. And you'll see this light blue bar here pushing just up there. Extremes in extreme heat, in extreme cold weather, not necessarily killing as many people, but you'll see, I think there is slightly more of the extreme cold that's killing than the red. Now, one thing a little caveat here, there are spikes in extreme hot temperatures that do end up killing a lot of people across the globe. This is important to add, and there has been a lot of mention of this in recent years. This is important, of course. Extreme heat does kill people. I'm not trying to say that it doesn't, but we're gonna circle around to some more data on this in a little bit. Annual extreme weather deaths and the death rates are tumbling. Of course, again, you'll see this. This is in the US, of course, but we're gonna see there is a trend that is global as we go on. And here again, the more global warming, the fewer predicted deaths from temperature. There are supposed to, and this is going up to 2080, these are predictions in an increase by 2080. Heat deaths and cold deaths. There are going to be less cold deaths because of, we would assume, some of the warming that's going to take place. There, of course, are going to be heat-related deaths, but there will be less cold-related deaths. So on balance, we're looking at an improvement in death rates due to weather and climate going forward. That is so important. And people on the extreme kind of alarmist side of things will never acknowledge this, but of course it looks very much to be true. Now, going from that, I wanted to have a look at an interesting sidebar kind of issue, and this is to do with the data sets that I've just had. Now, the data is all data that's been produced by very august pedigree institutions across the world who are measuring data and being very thorough in what they have done, and they do a pretty good job of that. Many of the data sets that I've produced for you are taken and run through the IPCC models that we're seeing through the last few decades. So they're very decent. Now, it's easy to be tricked by a climate denier. So this is a article. It's quite a long article put out by someone who wasn't very impressed with the inconvenient truth. And I wanted to just go through this. It's quite interesting. So I'm going to go through it as quick as I can. This is the author, Wrightstone. However, employs no such rigorous methods. He cherry picks data and leaps to conclusions that are not supported by legitimate science. In fact, almost every page of his book includes incorrect or misleading interpretations of the data or science. I'm not a big fan of this. I actually read through it, and what I'm going to do is show you that this is quite a weak article. Inconvenient facts claims over and over to be based in science and emphasize the importance of the scientific method. However, the author does not himself use the scientific method in his own analysis. There are no references to any peer-reviewed journal articles by Wrightstone himself. Many of his inconvenient facts are not controversial statements. In fact, most of them are actually true. Here's the rub. Look at this. He's agreeing that the stuff put out by Wrightstone is in fact fair and true. So let's go on. It's the conclusions that he draws from the facts in inverted commas that are not supported by peer-reviewed journal papers. They are just his own misleading opinions. So remember that. Facts in inverted commas. We're going to see that come up again. Now what we're going to do here is go through 7 myths, and not all of them are actually myths, and I'm going to show you why. 7 of them that this guy pulls out of his book, containing 60 myths. So 60 versus 7 here. We're going to see how most of these are, of course, true facts, inconvenient facts that Wrightstone talks about. About 25% of Wrightstone's inconvenient facts use a line of argument that compares, only 25% of course, okay, that compares modern levels of CO2 temperature and ocean acidity to historical levels of geological timescales. He argues that if levels were higher many years ago, before humans existed or before the Industrial Revolution, that humans are not the cause of modern high levels, so there's nothing we can do about it, and we shouldn't worry because it's all happened before. This is obviously an ongoing debate. I wasn't actually going to read that little bit there, but I wanted to show you this guy's line of reasoning. We're going to now pull out some of the information that this guy's put together. I sincerely hope anyone really interested will read the whole article here. It's quite interesting. But it doesn't actually show too much. So myth 1, we've already been through that, sorry. Myth 2, global warming is not due to CO2 or humans. Does not, we'll see that, of course. This is one of the graphs this guy pulls out. We've seen this already, and you'll see here there is obviously this hiatus that occurred between 1998 and 2018. But if you look, he has a gripe about the fact that he doesn't conclude with this last, say, 6 years of data, which shows a spike. But if you look at both of the ends of it, and what he was trying to do, what Wrightstone was trying to do, was just show that there's a stabilizing period where there is no warming, and this happened 2 or 3 times in the 20th century. But if you look at both extremes here, you'll see it's just under 0.8 in temperature anomaly at the beginning, and it's actually lower when he finishes in 2018, when the conclusion of this data set was reached. So it's actually gone down a little bit. I don't know whether this is really that important, but I thought I would just mention that the temperature's actually gone down during this period, or has finished down. Okay, rising sea levels are not due to CO2 or humans. Again, so I'm going to push through here. The Earth was warming as it recovered from the Little Ice Age. So this is an interesting point here he does raise. Okay, good on him. And so the oceans expanded and the glaciers melted. We have repeatedly seen inconvenient facts incorrectly use the natural temperature recovery from the Little Ice Age as evidence to support Wrightstone's false claims. The existence of acceleration in sea level rise before significant human CO2 emissions does not mean human CO2 emissions aren't causing sea level rise today. Okay, this is reasonable. And this is some of the data I used in that former video. You will see a constant rate of sea level rise there at this bar towards the end of that graph, and post World War II CO2 increase, of course, but it tracks nicely with what came before. And here, will we read this? Well, you can read it if you want, guys. You just pause and read. Interestingly, and this is quite cool, you'll see that it's not the fact that things are rising, but it's how slowly things are rising that really is important here, I think. So here's some data. Global average sea level change up until 2020. This is what he said. He doesn't actually say, well, how much this stuff is, the rising sea levels have tracked upwards. He's not interested in this. This is how much they actually have. And there is a slight curve upwards. And remember, this is inches here. So it's sea level rise has gone from 1880 up about 9 inches, I think 9-10 inches. We have a look here as well. There's a little curve here as well. Importantly, between 93 and 2017. This is you can see 20 millimeters, 40 millimeters, 60 millimeters. This is not much, guys. I'm sorry, and I understand this is. And again, this is. I mean, Obama's been buying big mansions on the sea in Florida recently. I mean, is this guy that concerned about this? I don't really reckon so. The house price will definitely be going down if this is a big deal. This is another piece of data here. Only most of this is all it's all fair. It's all there, right? But we're seeing again this one, interestingly, because it's pulled out a little more, shows really. It's insignificant, the amount of sea level rise. We're talking about thermal expansion, added water, mostly melt weather, and added water from thermal expansion as well. Antarctic sea level extent as well. This is to do with the Arctic sea level extent. Again, this is very normal looking, nothing serious here. The Arctic is not it's not really melting, or if it is, it's melting very, very slowly. This is completely within the realm of what the cycles of the weather do. Increasing Antarctic sea level, you might have heard of this, but the Antarctic in recent decades has been increasing in its size, the ice levels. And here we have a nice little graph showing the same thing. So 2021 here, you'll see the red is behind the other graphs, but it is absolutely in line with what we've seen recently. So yeah, there's not really much happening here. Myth 4: global warming is not a problem. In fact, it's good. This is debatable. I'm going to skip over this one. Please read the article if you're interested. There are numerous reasons why it can be debated that this is good, certainly for human life on the planet. Cold weather is killing more people than hot. We are a very adaptable species in terms of sea level rise as well. We can all push back a little bit into inland in the next 300 or 400 years. It's not going to be a massive deal. Of course, we built many of our cities on the coasts. It makes a lot of sense to do that, but I believe that we will be okay. I think we will be. Scientists do not agree that global warming is man-made. This was an heroic attempt at fraudulent attempt, I should say, at trying to manipulate statistics here. And this is something that this guy should have picked up on, because there was a massive furore about this from the skeptic side of this argument, and they debunked any notion that this was true. There are absolutely, I would say, a majority of scientists that believe, of course, that humans have caused some warming over the last 70 years or so. This is not really in dispute. And of course, the weather is warming. We know this. We've already seen the data on this. So there's a Forbes article written by Alex Epstein, which is very interesting. And what I did was actually I'm going to tell you now what you should do is go to the Climate Discussion Nexus on YouTube and have a look at the video. It's about 16 minutes long, and they totally destroy this argument and give you a very chronological sequence of events that shows that this 97% agree myth is exactly that. It's just a myth. And it was parroted around by Al Gore, by President Obama, by all manner of pundits and newscasters and so on across the West. It's not true, and they should have realized this. And a lot of there are some obviously press companies, news companies that picked up on this and wrote articles. Here's Forbes article here, which raises the question: what is that supposed to mean? This 97 thing, climate changes, that we have some impact, that we have a large impact, that we have a catastrophically large impact, that we have such a catastrophic impact that we shouldn't use fossil fuels. I'm going to read on. If you look at the literature, the specific meaning of the 97 claim is 97% of scientists, climate scientists, agree that there is a global warming trend and that human beings are the main cause. That is, that we are over 50% responsible. The warming is a whopping 0.8 degrees over the past 150 years, a warming that has tapered off to essentially nothing in the last decade and a half. This is, I just want to say, this is Epstein's opinions here. They're not necessarily mine. I would believe this guy, though, just to add that caveat. Even if 97% of climate scientists agree with this, and even if they are right, it is no way, shape or form, should imply that we should reject fossil fuels, which are crucial to the livelihoods of billions. And you're going to see down there, this is an important little factoid. Look at these 4 data sets here. As CO2 rises in the atmosphere, populations rise, GDP per person globally rises, and life outcomes rise too. We are absolutely, we have been benefited by fossil fuels by a ridiculous extent over the past 150, 200 years. We are absolutely reliant on fossil fuels for just about all our energy, and it is shocking, a little worrying for many of us to hear that there are certain NGOs and organizations and politicians that want us to get off our fossil fuels to the point that with the quickness that they are talking about. It would spell disaster for countries across the world. Just to go on a little more, this is a fairly clear statement. 97% of papers surveyed endorsed the view that man-made greenhouse gases were the main cause. Main in common usage, meaning more than 50%. So he's going on talking about this claim these people made, a couple of people made here, John Cook being one of them. We're just about to talk about him. But even a quick scan of the paper reveals that this is not the case. Cook is able to demonstrate only that a relative handful endorse the view that the Earth is warming up and human emissions of greenhouse gases are the main cause. Cook calls this explicit endorsement with qualification. Qualification means 50% or more. The problem is only a small percentage of the papers fall into this category. Cook does not say what percentage, but when the study was publicly challenged by economist David Friedman, one observer calculated that only 1.6% explicitly stated that man-made greenhouse gases caused at least 50% of global warming. This is heroic vocabulary, ladies and gentlemen. Where did most of the 97% come from then? Cook has created a category called explicit endorsement without qualification. You'll see here, don't want to read this, but we'll go on. The 97% claim is a deliberate misrepresentation designed to intimidate the public, and numerous scientists whose papers were classified by Cook protested. This is important. Cook's survey includes 10 of my 128 eligible papers. This is by a guy called Richard Tull. 5 out of 10 were rated incorrectly. 4 out of 5 were rated as endorsed rather than neutral. Sorry about this. Yes. Again, this is another article explaining the same. Okay, 1.6%, not 97%, agree that humans are the main cause of global warming. Again, you can read these articles. Just stick this on Google, and you'll get all this. And I just want to say, sorry about this, that I wrote about 4 or 5 pages of notes from the Climate Discussion Nexus's video on this. It is very clear that this guy, John Cook, who's a cartoonist, who works from home in Australia, was extremely shabby with the way that he put together this survey. Certainly not a scientifically minded guy. I even heard that 2 of his researchers essentially quit before the data was collected. So it's clear to see what happened here, that he was not equipped to conduct a proper study, and he rushed it like you wouldn't believe. So global warming has not created more extreme weather events. Well, let's go through the data and see here. This is 4,000 villages, one of the worst floods in India. This happened in 1938, I believe. There was a lot happening in 1938, a tremendous spike in a heat wave in America. We saw that, I think, in the other video. Hankow, rivers cover 80% in the north. Thousands die. 30,000 are homeless. This is another extreme weather event. It was floodings, I believe. Sorry, I picked this up, and I really wanted to show you that the data for this, and these paper cuttings are showing you that there has always been extreme weather events that have hit certain parts of the globe. A serious drought situation in the States. This great Dust Bowl event that happened, but it was, of course, we'll see, it was global. Hurricane winds near 200 miles per hour. This is extreme, ladies and gentlemen. Again, in Mississippi, across the middle of America here as well. Worldwide droughts is seen as likely. It's around the same time. World drought, and there was a drought in England at around the same time here. So the cycles go up or they go down. Certain areas are hit in certain places around the world, and they migrate to other areas as time goes by. Worldwide droughts again. Drought in the wheat producing countries of 3 continents threatens a food shortage, as well as ruin for many farmers. And here is an interesting little morsel here from history. The history of the world, droughts goes back to the year 627, when in France and Germany thousands of human beings died of thirst. In the year 1000, the rivers of Europe dried up, and heaps of, I can't actually read this, I'm so annoyed. You can read through that as I'm going. I'm actually reading from a very small piece of script at the moment, unfortunately. Started the video and I lost the ability to zoom in on here. I'm sorry about this. Cold weather again kills far more people than hot weather. So the summary: cold weather kills 20 times as many people as hot weather, according to the international study analysis of over 74 million deaths in 384 locations across 13 countries. This guy is incorrect when he makes his assumptions in this article. The facts also reveal that deaths due to moderately hot or cold weather substantially increased those resulting from extreme heat waves or cold spells. So again, we can read here as well: clinical outcomes of temperature-related injuries treated in hospital settings, 2011 to 2018. This is a United States study. Says here the accrued annual total hospital utilization incident rate for heat injuries was 23.6% per 100,000 residents, compared to 23.2 per 100,000 residents for cold injuries. However, the accrued annual inpatient admission incident rates was more than fourfold higher for cold injuries compared to heat injuries. There you go. Although hypothermia made up 27% of all temperature-related injuries, it comprised 94% of the deaths. Of all the deaths. So again, interesting and rather worrying when you look at cold weather as related to hot weather. So ocean acidification is not a problem. This is a tricky one. It might well be. I mean, we're looking at I'm just going to read this for you. He does this to confuse the reader. This is Wrightstone. Scientists are not concerned that the oceans will become acidic, only that they will become more acidic on the pH scale, meaning the pH will drop. Becoming acidic means, by definition, a pH level below 7. Currently, the ocean has pH level of around 8.1. Becoming more acidic just mean that it will drop perhaps to 7.8. It is highly unlikely to drop below 7 anytime soon. So these are things that we have to address. But he's saying himself here it's very unlikely that we'll hit 7 anytime soon. Anytime soon is not specified. And of course, fish and coral reefs are interesting. They are actually capable of moving themselves. They are a living organism. It's only about 10 meters of coral have been affected in recent years, and we find, I mean, Australians know this well. They pop up and go away with alarming frequency. Actually, there is a lot of research on coral reefs, and it's not as bad as the alarmists say that it is. Here we're going to just read a little bit. Estimates of global, this is from this article, estimates of global ocean pH trends to the year 2000 indicate that the oceans have already acidified by 0.1 pH units relative to pre-industrial times. 0.1 pH units. Again, what is this? What is it? What does it mean? Is it catastrophic? Probably not. Geochemical models forecast an exponential decrease of nearly 0.8 pH units by 2300. So that's quite a long time in the future. We have a little time to address these problems, and I think we should. And of course, the nations of the world are already implementing all kinds of carbon emissions goals and restrictions. It is concerning that they might be doing or trying to do too much too quickly, and that might very deleteriously affect human progress on this planet. So something to think about. And of course, we're going to be affecting poorer people. You obviously know how much very wealthy individuals, celebrities and film stars and so on love using their private jets. Well, people in the third and second worlds rely on fossil fuels to get around in these banged up cars. You'll see them all the time, powering their homes. We don't want them to be affected by this. They are often living on the breadline. They require fossil fuels, and as we've seen, as countries move on to fossil fuels, instantly their flourishing gets better. We don't want to see that change. We want to see it get better for them. Alex Epstein is an advocate for more fossil fuels, and he makes a pretty good argument for why second and third world countries should have more fossil fuels, not less. That we are doing enough now in the first world, and of course initiating all these renewable energy plans and moving to ever better ways of creating nuclear, which are great, which can be fantastic, and that we're already doing a pretty decent job. And here, right at the end, so we've been through 7 of the 60 facts in Inconvenient Truth. This guy has already got, I think, 3 incorrect, so we're left with 5. One of them, obviously, the 97% of climate scientists agree myth is totally untrue, and he should have done a better job of actually finding out about the criticisms of that the 97% bit, but obviously this guy didn't. And this is the only criticism that I found on Google of this guy's work. The only one that I went about 3 or 4 pages down. So I did want to do my due diligence here, and pick out this and try and find out what I could find. But I'm going to read the conclusion for you. Wrightstone found 60 facts in inverted commas, most of which are true. Okay, so they're true then. What are you saying here? We know a lot now, I hope, by the end of this video. Anyway, though, most of which are true in facts in inverted commas, that when highlighted can make an open-minded person scratch their head and wonder whether climate change is what it is. He uses this small set of facts to support his myths, but legitimate scientists have thousands of facts that point to the opposite direction and evidently show the unfortunate reality of climate change. Well, yes, we agree. CO2 affects the climate. It traps heat. Okay, CO2 in large numbers it actually preserves and traps less heat. We also know that. How much is the current CO2 levels, about 410 parts per million, really having on the climate? And can we adapt in the next few hundred years? I think we can. That's the purpose that I put this video out. I hope you enjoy it. Please read this article if you wish. The Climate Discussion Nexus is a very cool YouTube channel. Alex Epstein's a very interesting guy as well. I would check those guys out. You'll see in the 97% of climate change thing, you'll see there where this information has been twisted by the mainstream media, and it's unfortunate that we are lied so much by our media on these things. This is clearly an agenda here, and people are obviously concerned about certain UN plans that are, we need energy. Energy is the foundation of a well-working society. It's what keeps our lights on at night. It's what keeps us able to travel distances at speed. Our children need energy. So I hope this is interesting. Take care of yourselves. I will be producing more videos as we go on. I hope I haven't rambled too much, and take care. Goodbye.